This is a strange paradox. The less you care, the more life seems to work in your favor. The moment you stop obsessing, chasing, and gripping onto things with desperation, they start to flow effortlessly toward you. But why? Michel de Montaigne, a 16th century philosopher, lived by this principle. He observed the world with curiosity, not attachment. He questioned why people were constantly caught in cycles of worry, desire, and disappointment. And what he found was simple. It's our obsession with the control that makes us feel out of control. Imagine this. You're desperately trying to impress someone. You analyze every word, every text, every move, trying to be perfect. But in doing so, you come off as stiff, anxious, and unnatural. Now contrast that with someone who is relaxed, self-assured, and simply enjoying the moment. Who do you think is more attractive? The same applies to every aspect of life. Money, relationships, success. The more you chase something out of fear, the more it seems to slip away. But the moment you let go of the outcome, stop trying so hard, and focus on simply being, rather than forcing, things start aligning in ways you never expected. Montaigne wasn't saying to be careless or lazy. He was saying to stop clinging. When you detach from the need for things to go a certain way, you free yourself from stress, from suffering, from the endless cycle of not enough. And that's where the real power lies. There's a strange psychological trick at play here, the law of reversed effort. The harder you try, the worse the outcome. It's like trying to fall asleep. The more you force yourself to sleep, the more awake you become. The more you try to be confident, the more insecure you feel. The more you try to be happy, the more aware you are of your unhappiness. This is why Montaigne believed in flowing with life, not fighting it. He noticed that people who were always scheming, forcing outcomes, and obsessing over every little thing were usually the most miserable. But those who took a step back, observed life with a sense of detachment, and stopped gripping onto every little desire, they found joy effortlessly. Think about a time you wanted something so badly that it consumed you. Maybe you wanted a job, a relationship, or a certain outcome in life. Did you notice how your desperation pushed it further away? It's because when you grasp too tightly, you operate from a state of lack. You're broadcasting to the world, I don't have this, and I need it. And the world responds accordingly. Now think of the opposite. The times when you weren't looking, when you didn't care as much, when you were just being yourself. Opportunities, people, and experiences naturally gravitated toward you. Why? Because your energy was different. Instead of forcing, you were allowing. This is what Montaigne understood so well, the power of relaxed detachment. He wasn't saying, don't care about anything. He was saying, care, but don't cling. Take action, but don't strangle the outcome. Do your best, then trust that what's meant to be will be. And ironically, when you stop needing things to happen in a certain way, you unlock a strange power. Things start happening in your favor. There's an interesting irony in life. The more you relax, the more control you actually have. Not in the way most people think, though. Control doesn't come from gripping tighter, from worrying, or from micromanaging every detail of life. It comes from understanding that life itself is fluid. It responds to energy, not desperation. Montaigne saw this firsthand. He spent much of his life observing how people lived, why some suffered endlessly while others seemed at peace, even in chaos. He realized that most people are trapped in a mental prison of their own making. They believe that happiness, success, or fulfillment is something they must chase, something just out of reach. But the more they chase it, the further it moves away. It's like standing in a lake, trying to grab a handful of water. If you squeeze your hand tightly, the water slips through your fingers. But if you simply keep your hand open, the water naturally pools in your palm. This is the paradox of effort. The right kind of effort is effortless. It's a state of being rather than doing. And that's where most people get stuck. They believe if they're not constantly striving, constantly pushing, constantly worried, then they're failing. But Montaigne's philosophy tells us the opposite. When you loosen your grip, life flows in your favor. Look at some of the most successful, charismatic, and fulfilled people in the world. They don't look desperate. They don't seem like they're forcing anything. They move through life with a sense of ease, certainty, and presence. That's not because they don't care. It's because they've mastered the art of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean you stop trying. It means you stop trying to control everything. You stop overthinking every possible outcome. You stop letting fear dictate your actions. Instead, you move through life with confidence, knowing that things will work out as they should. This is the mindset shift that frees you from stress, anxiety, and frustration. The moment you stop needing something to happen, you put yourself in a state where it's more likely to happen. And the people who understand this, they live life on an entirely different level. So what happens when you actually start living this way? When you stop gripping onto life so tightly and instead let things flow. It's like stepping out of a storm and realizing you were the one creating the wind the entire time. The tension, the struggle, the endless mental tug of war, all of it was self-imposed. Montaigne understood this deeply. He saw how people create their own suffering by obsessing over things they can't control. They replay conversations in their heads, worry about what others think, stress over the future, or hold on to past mistakes like a badge of honor. But what if you simply stopped? Not in a careless, reckless way, but in a way that acknowledges, this isn't helping me. Think about it. How much of your stress comes from problems that aren't even real? How often do you suffer more in your mind than in reality? Montaigne believed that most of our struggles aren't caused by life itself, but by our resistance to it. The moment you stop fighting against reality, you gain a strange kind of power. Take relationships, for example. We've all seen it. Someone who desperately chases love, overthinks every interaction, worries about being liked, and in doing so, pushes people away. Why? Because neediness repels. Desperation signals lack, and people can feel it. But the moment someone lets go, stops overanalyzing, and just enjoys being themselves, everything changes. They become magnetic. They attract people effortlessly. This same principle applies to every area of life. Think about the last time you were truly in the moment. Maybe you were having a deep conversation, lost in a creative project, or fully engaged in a challenge. You weren't forcing it. You weren't obsessed with the outcome. You were just present, and because of that, you did your best work. Montaigne believed that life rewards those who stop forcing things. He saw that those who lived with a lightness, a sense of humor, a willingness to flow rather than control, they thrived. They weren't constantly frustrated by life's unpredictability because they weren't demanding it to be any other way. And here's the paradox. The more relaxed you become, the more life gives you what you want. The universe responds not to struggle, but to alignment. When you move through life without grasping, you create space for things to come to you naturally. Success, relationships, creativity, opportunities, they all come when you stop chasing them like a desperate hunter and start allowing them like a magnet. Montaigne's wisdom is a reminder that ease is not laziness. Letting go is not giving up. It's a strategy, a superpower, and the people who understand this, they stop fighting the current and learn to ride the wave. Now here's where things get really interesting. If letting go brings clarity, control, and even success, why do most people struggle with it? Why do we cling so tightly to control, even when it clearly makes things worse? It all comes down to one thing, the illusion of certainty. Your brain is wired to seek patterns, predict outcomes, and hold on to familiar things, even if those things are making you miserable. It would rather cling to a painful certainty than step into the unknown. That's why people stay in bad relationships, tolerate toxic workplaces, and keep repeating self-destructive habits. It's not because they don't want better, it's because their brain tells them that at least this is familiar. Montaigne saw this in his time too. He noticed how people would rather hold on to beliefs that comfort them than truths that free them. He wrote that our biggest suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from the way we resist what is. Think about this, when you fully accept the unknown, suddenly life becomes playful instead of stressful. Instead of seeing uncertainty as a threat, you see it as an open-ended game, one where you're free to experiment, pivot, and adapt. A perfect example of this: artists, entrepreneurs, and innovators. The most successful people in history weren't the ones who controlled everything. They were the ones who mastered the art of adaptation. They understood that rigid control leads to failure, but fluidity leads to growth. Take Leonardo da Vinci. If he had insisted on one specific path, one fixed goal, he would have never become one of the greatest polymaths in history. Instead, he followed his curiosity, bounced between disciplines, and let go of the need to define himself in a rigid way. As a result, he mastered painting, anatomy, engineering, and even early robotics. because he didn't force himself into a single box. Or consider the greatest investors in the world. They don't panic when the market crashes. Why? Because they understand the nature of cycles. They expect uncertainty, and because of that, they stay calm while everyone else loses their minds. They know that control is an illusion, and that's exactly why they don't need it. Now think about your own life. Where are you clinging to certainty that's holding you back? Maybe it's a belief about yourself that no longer serves you. Maybe it's an identity you're afraid to let go of. Maybe it's a path you started but no longer feel aligned with, yet you keep going because it's what I planned. This is what Montaigne meant when he said, "A man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears." We don't fear reality. We fear losing the illusion of control over it. The moment you stop trying to force a specific outcome, something powerful happens. You stop reacting and you start responding. Instead of chasing, you attract. Instead of resisting, you adapt. Instead of seeing life as something to conquer, you see it as something to co-create. Montaigne wasn't just talking about philosophy. He was describing a blueprint for life, a way to move through the world without tension, without unnecessary suffering, without the constant mental battle. Because at the end of the day, certainty is an illusion, but your ability to adapt is real. The more you embrace that, the more free you become. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing control, life starts flowing in your favor. It's not because some mystical force rewards you for letting go. It's because your mind stops working against you. Think about how stress affects people. The more anxious you are, the worse you perform. Public speakers who focus too much on not messing up freeze on stage. Athletes who obsess over winning choke under pressure. And in relationships, the more you cling to someone, the more likely they are to pull away. It's a pattern that plays out over and over. When you grip too tightly, you break what you're trying to hold. But when you relax, things fall into place effortlessly. Montaigne understood this better than most. He saw how people lived in constant fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of being judged, fear of the unknown. But what he discovered was that fear itself was the real enemy, not the things people were afraid of. If you've ever had a moment where you just stop caring what people think, you know exactly what I mean. The moment you stop filtering yourself, conversations flow naturally. The moment you stop forcing ideas, creativity explodes. And the moment you stop needing something, you often get it. So why is this so hard for most people? Because we're conditioned to believe that control equals safety. We grow up being told that life needs to be planned, measured, and predictable. That uncertainty is bad. That letting go is reckless. But look around. The happiest, most successful people aren't the ones who try to control everything. They're the ones who embrace the unknown. They let life unfold. They trust themselves to adapt. They understand that there's a fine line between discipline and obsession, between structure and suffocation. Here's the reality. Most of your stress doesn't come from what's happening. It comes from resisting what's happening. It's the mental tug of war between what you want and what is. It's the endless internal battle of, this shouldn't be happening, when in reality, it already is. So here's the shift. Instead of seeing uncertainty as something to fear, see it as an open invitation, a chance to play with life instead of fighting against it, a chance to create, pivot, and adapt without losing yourself in the process. Because when you stop trying to force life into your idea of how it should be, you finally start experiencing it for what it actually is. And in that space, everything starts to fall into place. If this resonated with you, drop a comment below. What's one area of your life where letting go changed everything? Also, if you want more content like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next.